This is the Evan Miller Report on Pundit Press Radio. Due to time-sensitive information from a delayed broadcast that aired the day before on SHR Media, some stories may be updated or irrelevant at this time. We hope you enjoy this broadcast of the Evan Miller Report on Pundit Press Radio from SHR Media.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, at least 26 people have been killed in a series of attacks by Islamic militants in the northern Egypt Sinai Peninsula. We have more on that story tonight. A gunman has been arrested in a studio of a Dutch news broadcaster after disrupting the main evening news. In France, anti-terror police have arrested an 8-year-old boy and have interrogated him. We'll tell you what happened. EU foreign ministers put more sanctions on Russia. This as former leader Gorbachev warns of the risk of an armed conflict in the new Cold War. And the U.S. says no to handing Guantanamo Bay back to Cuba. We'll have all those stories and more, plus Corey Evans.
I'm looking forward to all those, Jay. Malaysian Flight 378 is declared an accident when it ran out of gas, but Chinese passengers' relatives think that's a load of hot gas. A New York university wants to be gender neutral to students in our continuing battle against global socialism. McDonald's is identified as having an identity crisis in business. We're going inside the classroom again in lawsuits across America. And a real identity crisis rears its ugly head in entertainment. I'm looking forward to doing those stories and more in the Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source. Let's get going now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And I'm Corey Evan, and the clouds are still lingering over SoCal, so that must mean it's going to be a heavy news day.
Where at least 25 people have been killed in a series of attacks by Islamic militants in the north of Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. A car bomb and mortars hit military targets in the North Sinai capital, El Ersha, killing a number of soldiers today. Other attacks took place in the nearby town of Sheikh Zilwad at the town of Rafia, bordering Gaza. Militant group Ansar Belta al-Makis, which pledges allegiance to Islamic State, said it carried out the attacks. The insurgents have intensified attacks since Egypt's Islamic President Mohamed Morsi was ousted back in 2013. Tensions have also been raised across Egypt this week amid protests marking the anniversary of the 2011 uprising that ousted then leader Hosni Mubarak. Egyptian officials said a car bomb had been detonated outside a military base in El Arish, and mortar rounds were also fired at a military hotel, a police club, and more than a dozen checkpoints. Newspaper Al Ahram said its El Arish office, which is opposite the hotel and base, has been completely destroyed. A gunman has been arrested in the studio of a Dutch news broadcaster, NOS, after disrupting the main evening news, reportedly demanding airtime. Staff were evacuated from the building in Media Park in the central city of Hilversum. The man, smartly dressed and carrying a long pistol, paced around a studio that appeared to be empty. When armed police confronted him, he dropped the gun and was overpowered. The suspect from the small town of Pundit near The Hague is being held on suspicion of making a threat, weapons possession, and taking a hostage. During the disruption to the NOS news program, the channel broadcast a message reading, "In connection with circumstances, no broadcast is available at this time." The man's motive is still unclear. The NOS footage shows him saying the things that are going to be said. Pause. Those are very large world affairs. They are hired by the security service. A threatening letter the gunman allegedly gave to staff warning of bomb and cyber attacks if he was prevented from going on air has been published on the NOS's website in Dutch. A reporter who spoke to the man said he had claimed to be from a hackers collective, according to the AP news agency. When the channel came on air again, it broadcast video of the gunman wandering about a studio. According to an NOS director, Jen Din Jong, the gunman had wanted to go to the main evening news studio, but instead a guard took him to the studio where daytime bulletins are broadcast. Dressed in a black suit, white shirt, and black tie, and carrying a long black pistol, he can be seen on the video pacing about the studio, which appears to be otherwise empty. When armed police arrive, they order him to drop his weapon and lie down on the floor, which he can be seen doing in the video before being arrested. According to De Jong, the gunman had a list of demands and wanted 10 minutes airtime. No shots were fired, according to the broadcaster. Over to France now, where French officials have announced a series of counterterrorism measures aimed at disaffected youth, part of an expanded campaign to fight the kind of Islamic extremism that inspired the terror attacks in Paris earlier this month. But on Wednesday, when French police detained and questioned an 8-year-old boy, yeah, Corey Evan, you are hearing it right, an 8-year-old boy who had praised the attack on the Centurial newspaper Charlie Hebdo earlier this month, critics asked whether the government had gone too far. While dozens of people have been arrested and accused of defending terrorism since the attacks, the child from the southern city of Nice appears to be the youngest by far. The boy first triggered concern when he refused to take part in a national minute of silence for the victims of Paris's attacks, which left 17 people dead. He later declared, quote, "The French must be killed. I am with the terrorists. The Muslims did well, and the journalists got what they deserved." Fabi Lee Dawazi, deputy director for public security in the region, told BFM television agency France Press also reports that police questioned the boy for a half hour over his remarks. Sifin Guz, a lawyer for the family, said the decision to question the child at a police station shows a collective hysteria. An 8-year-old does not belong in a police station. This is a disproportionate and completely unreal, he told the AP. While the boy's case is likely an outliner, French authorities face pressure to face the potential threat of radicalized Muslim youth and to uproot extremist networks that have sent more than 1,000 French volunteers to fight in Syria and Iraq. The French government unveiled on Wednesday its latest tactic in the campaign, a graphic 2-minute video showing clips of executions, wounded children, and crucifixions. The video is designed to warn potential recruits that the glory promised to them by groups like the self-described Islamic State is a lie, as the New York Times has reported. The new video is part of a larger strategy by the French government to engage with youth at the risk of taking up radical ideologies and to overcome cultural risks exposed by the attacks in Paris. Over to Russia now, where European Union foreign ministers proposed on Thursday that block extend asset freezes and travel bans to further individuals deemed responsible for hostilities in eastern Ukraine. They say, quote, "We have decided to have a proposal within 1 week of further names of individuals and entities to be added to this list. That decision will be taken at the next Foreign Affairs meeting on February 9th, so in 10 days, EU Foreign Policy Chief Federal Mondar told a news conference. Mordecai also said any decision on new economic sanctions on Russia would have to be decided by EU leaders. Reportedly, And the last Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, on Friday, this is Friday over in Europe, has accused the United States of drawing Russia into a new Cold War and said he feared hostilities could escalate into an armed conflict. The United States has already drawn us into a new Cold War, trying openly to achieve its main ideas of triumphalism, Gorbachev said in an interview with the Interfax news agency. Where will that lead all of us? A Cold War is already being waged openly. What's next? Asked the 83-year-old former Soviet president, who during his time in power eased relations with the West but is vilified in Russia for allowing the breakup of the USSR. Unfortunately, I cannot say, he continues, for sure that a Cold War won't lead to a hot one. I fear they could take the risk, Gorbachev said, apparently referring to the U.S. Gorbachev in November last year warned that the world was on the brink of a new Cold War. In his latest comments, Gorbachev criticized the West for imposing sanctions on Russia. And in efforts to improve ties with Cuba will not extend to handing control of Guantanamo Bay back to Havana. An update on a story we brought to you yesterday. According to what the White House said on Thursday, the president does not believe that the prison at Guantanamo Bay should be closing down, said White House spokesman and BS artist Josh Earnest, but the naval base is not something that we wish to be closed, he continued. The base on Cuba's southwestern tip is currently the site of the largest naval base, as well as a deeply known prison used to detain terror suspects without a trial. That is according to Democrats. Cuban President Raul Castro on Wednesday said handing back control of the 45 square mile site was a precondition for normalizing ties with the United States. Castro and Obama simultaneously announced on December 17th their intention to end half a century of animosity and normalize ties that broke off in 1961. The U.S. took control of Guantanamo following a treaty in 1903. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, an update to that story yesterday, that the U.S. has said no in handing Guantanamo Bay back over to Cuba. All right, folks, so I'll be back with some of the political news, including former Governor Rick Perry's pet project for Texas startups is a goner under the new current governor, Abbott, and Texas Muslims being overthrown on their Muslim capital day by Christians in the Texas Capitol. We have those stories and more, but for now I send it over to Corey Evan up in our Los Angeles newsroom, and he has the day's other news. Corey, take it away.
Taking it, Jay. More than 10 months, about 328 days, after it went missing with 239 passengers and crew on board, Malaysian investigators said today that they declared the disappearance of Flight 370 an accident, clearing the way for families to pursue compensation. Investigators with Malaysia's Civil Aviation Authority concluded the aircraft exhausted its fuel supply over the southern Indian Ocean and is on the sea floor. Everyone on the flight is presumed dead. An underwater search continues west of Perth, Australia. The declaration is by no means an end to the search for the jet, a wide-bodied Boeing 777. At this juncture, there is no evidence to substantiate any speculations as to the cause of the accident, according to investigators. The plane disappeared March 8th last year en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing and is believed to have crashed in the southern Indian Ocean off the coast of Western Australia. That remote area is far from any possible landing sites, and the sea there has known depths of more than 19,000 feet. Relatives of the 154 Chinese passengers on board the flight, many of whom cling to hope their loved ones are still alive, reacted with disbelief and anger to the announcement today. The declaration by Malaysia government officials will help relatives obtain death certificates and seek compensation such as life insurance beyond the $50,000 the airline has already offered. But the relatives are concerned the declaration is a preamble to calling off the search for the Boeing 777 entirely, even as Malaysian and Australian officials insisted the search would continue. Justin Green, a New York lawyer at Kreindler & Kreindler, who represents 23 of those families, said they have 2 years to seek compensation from the airline, and the declaration allows them to request a death certificate and set up an estimate. But the timing months after the disappearance, while still a month shy of the anniversary, upset families that hold out hope that passengers made it to land somewhere. The search and rescue mission in the South China Sea, the Straits of Malacca, the Andaman Sea, and the southern Indian Ocean was an unprecedented exercise involving aircraft and vessels from 13 countries. Difficulties with the search about 1,000 miles west of Perth include the ocean up to 4 miles deep, of course. Ships drag sonar equipment or send autonomous subs to scan the ocean floor for objects that look man-made, which experts say is difficult, tedious work. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau announced Wednesday that searchers have covered 7,000 square miles of ocean floor for about 30% of the area targeted. Completion is targeted for May. Next up, Indonesian investigators announced Thursday that the co-pilot of the crashed AirAsia jet was in controls when he struggled to recover the aircraft as stall warnings sounded. The Airbus A320, according to the AP, crashed into the Java Sea December 28th, halfway from Indonesia's city of Surabaya to Singapore. All 162 people on board were killed. Chief Investor of the National Transportation Safety Committee, Marjono Siswasoewarno, said that the cockpit voice recording indicated that the co-pilot, French national Remy Emmanuel Plezel, was flying the plane while Indonesian Captain Irianto was monitoring. Irianto, who like many Indonesians uses a single name, was a former fighter pilot with more than 20,000 flying hours, while less experienced Plezel had about 6,000. Siswasoewarno said the black boxes retrieved from the seabed provided a pretty clear picture of what went wrong in the last moments of AirAsia 8501, as the plane was struggling to recover and stall warnings sounded until the end of the recording. Another investigator, Ertata Lanangali, said that based on the voice recorder, the captain was monitoring and communicating with air traffic control while Plezel was flying the plane. Quote, but it is normal practices, both pilots can exchange their roles with each other, said Lanangali. Investigators concluded that the plane was in airworthy condition prior to the crash. Both flight and cockpit data recorders showed that the jet was stabilized, cruising at the height of 32,000 feet before the pilot contacted ground control saying they were turning left, and a minute later sought permission to climb to 38,000 feet. The ATC at Jakarta's Soekarno-Hatta Airport asked them to stand by. Siswasoewarno, the weather satellite images at the time, showed a formation of storm clouds reaching up to 44,000 feet. He added that flight data showed that the jet was in a dangerously fast climb and stalled before going down slowly into the last position of 24,000 feet high recorded on the radar. He said investigators were still looking into whether turbulence or updrafts contributed to the plane's drastic climb, as repeated stall warnings were heard clearly on the cockpit recording within 4 minutes until the end of the recording, since the plane reached more than 8 degrees of its pitch. And this explosion devastated a maternity hospital in Mexico City today, killing at least 2 people, injuring dozens, and setting off a scramble for survivors in the rubble. This from USA Today. More than 60 people were injured, 22 of them seriously, Mexico City Mayor Miguel Angel Mancera said at a news conference. The blast destroyed nearly 3/4 of the hospital, and authorities said more victims could be buried in the massive pile of smashed concrete and twisted metal. The dead include a woman and a child. City officials earlier had said at least 7 were dead. CNN, citing the mayor, said a tanker was attempting to resupply propane gas to the kitchen of the maternity and children's hospital of Coajimalpa when a hose burst just after 7 a.m., causing a leak blamed for the blast. The truck belonged to Gas Express Nieto, which describes itself as one of the 4 major liquid propane gas providers in Mexico. Witnesses said the tanker workers struggled frantically for 15 or 20 minutes to repair the leak while a large cloud of gas formed. The 2 workers and the driver were injured in the blast and are in custody, a city spokesman said. The Red Cross said it provided 23 ambulances and more than 40 rescuers, according to CNN. The agency said it transported 9 babies to other area hospitals. Local borough chief Adrian Rubalcava told AP a lack of ambulances hampered the effort to transport the injured to a nearby hospital. Jose Martinez, a spokesman for the Mexico City mayor, told NBC News 52 people were rescued and 25 of them were being treated. President Enrique Peña Nieto said some firefighters were overcome by gas fumes. He tweeted condolences to the injured and to the relatives of those who lost their lives this morning. Ismael Garcia, who lives a block from the hospital, told AP that he saw a super explosion and everything caught on fire. A government website said the city-run hospital on the western edge of the capital was founded in 93 and had 35 beds. It's located in a densely populated lower-middle-class neighborhood next to a school, according to the AP. Very unfortunate situation there. When it happens at a maternity and children's hospital, it especially breaks our hearts. Our prayers go out to those affected. And on that note, we will take a break, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, Amazon's holiday sales report is not what Amazon considers amazing. Cord cutters are really cutting into Time Warner's profit margin. In lawsuits, prepare once again to get schooled. And a university wants to drop gender identities as a requirement. Forgive me, I've misphrased that. They're going gender neutral in global socialism. All those stories and more, plus the ever more eloquent Jason Miller.
You're so kind, Corey. A Texas rally by Muslims seeking tolerance is disrupted by protesters. We have that story. Plus, a newly elected Texas state lawmaker is under fire for what her opinions on Facebook about Muslim visitors attending the same event and the Capitol. All this, plus the Supreme Court is going to be talking about unions. Could unions be over? We'll have that story and more when we return on the Evan Miller Report. You're listening to the SHR Media Network. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Is radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Is radio.
In a moment, cancer changed our lives forever.
We were told nothing could be done to enjoy these final moments together.
But in that moment, when all seemed lost,
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital gave us hope.
Because at this moment, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is saving lives with pioneering research and care. We're changing the way the world treats childhood cancer by sharing our discoveries with doctors and scientists everywhere.
And we'll never have to pay St. Jude for anything, ever.
At this moment, she wants to be in her own bed.
I want to be back at school with my friends.
I want to be outside playing.
Please take a moment and join St. Jude in finding cures and saving children. Visit stjude.org.
Let's get back to the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio.
Welcome back to the Evan Miller Report, ladies and gentlemen. Finally, they figured out how to turn on the heaters over on Wall Street. The Dow is up 225 points at 17,416. The NASDAQ, 45 points, up at 4683. And the S&P 500 earned 19 points to end up with 2021. Otherwise, around the world, it's a bit of a mixed bag. The FTSE and the Hang Seng are down, but the DAX and the Nikkei are up. Data on jobless claims Thursday confirmed what U.S. consumers have been saying for the past 3 months. A strengthening job market is making Americans more confident, they say. The number of applicants for unemployment insurance plunged by 43,000 to just 265,000 in the week ended January 24th, the fewest since April 2000, according to the Labor Department. The Bloomberg Index of Consumer Comfort climbed in the 7-day period ended January 25th, to the highest level since July 2007. The slump in claims, while probably overstated by seasonal fluctuations, is said to help ease concern that firings were inching up as companies fretted over slowing global growth. The confidence figures are the latest to show results could potentially help the U.S. powered past events abroad as falling gasoline prices and the lowest unemployment rate since mid-2008 propel spending. At least that's the theory, but we here at the Evan Miller Report are not so easily convinced. The online retail giant Amazon has reported weaker profits for the busy Christmas period, but a 15% rise in sales has cheered investors, thus backing our previous statement. The company made a net profit of $214 million for the last 3 months of 2014, which is a drop of $25 million on the same period in 2013. However, it was an improvement on the previous quarter in which Amazon made a net loss of $437 million. The company's shares rose by nearly 8% in after-hours trading, but despite net sales of $89 billion, Amazon made a loss of $241 million for 2013 as a whole. So, we will keep an eye on business, and we'll let you know if anything good comes of any of that. And if McDonald's incoming CEO wants to turn around the company, at least their stagnant U.S. business, he must deal with its total brand confusion, Yale management professor Jeff Sonnenfeld told CNBC today. Quote, the quality of the food, the price confusion, are they going to be the place where you go for value meals or dollar meals, or are they trying to upgrade it? Sonnenfeld said in a Squawk Box interview. Chief Executive Don Thompson will retire at age 51 on March 1st, and Steve Easterbrook, the restaurant's chain's senior VP and chief brand officer, will take the company's top position, McDonald said. Shares of McDonald's were up 3% in pre-market trading today. Sonnenfeld said Easterbrook is a fantastic choice to head McDonald's because he turned around the chain's Europe business and reshaped its brand image in the UK. As a proven implementer and a leader with ideas, Easterbrook, quote, can make a big difference, he said. Easterbrook joined McDonald's in his native Britain in 1993. He became president of McDonald's Europe and led the chain's efforts to elevate its marketing, advance menu innovation, and create an infrastructure for its digital initiatives, McDonald's said in a release. Sonnenfeld noted that McDonald's has gone through 5 CEOs since '99, 2 of whom the company lost to sudden death. McDonald's franchisees are optimistic about Easterbrook, at least according to RJ Hatovi, Morningstar's global director of consumer equity research. They feel that the chief brand executive has had good ideas, such as focusing on advanced metrics like customer engagement, that have not been acted upon. The company needs to reinvigorate franchisees who are turned off by McDonald's current strategy, said Bill George, professor of management practice at Harvard Business. In addition to replacing the CEO, McDonald's should also shake up its leadership with a mix of insiders and outsiders, he said. None of which will probably get Jason Miller into their restaurants, but as long as they don't mess too much with their halfway decent breakfast, at least they'll keep me at breakfast. Yes, I go there for breakfast, Jay, but what can I say? A quick little breakfast in, out, less than 5 minutes, and then I'm off to work. That's all I do there. That's all I do, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not endorsing them in any way.
Yeah, well, neither am I when I say I like a good Denny's breakfast, bud. So
yeah, we have different ideas of what a quick breakfast is, but I do agree on my birthday I'm going there.
If that's the only thing we're going to be disagreeing about, what we're eating for breakfast, I think we're in pretty good company here.
Yes. Haha. And that's all I've got for business, Jay. I'll toss it back to you.
All right, and Corey, you have the latest starting out tonight on Global Socialism tonight. Take it away.
Okay, right back in my court. The Graduate Center at the City University of New York, or CUNY, will no longer use courtesy titles Mr. and Ms. in official written communication to prospective students and third parties in the interests of gender inclusivity. This according to the Wall Street Journal. But some faculty members at the graduate school are worried they've been told what they can and cannot say, according to the Wall Street Journal. The Graduate Center, in a January 16th memo reported by the Journal, Interim Provost Louise Lenihan wrote that the new policy was part of the school's ongoing effort to ensure a respectful, welcoming, and gender-inclusive learning environment and to accommodate properly the diverse population of current and prospective students. The Grad Center told the Huffington Post that the memo was actually aimed at advising faculty about the school's new preferred name policy, which allows students to go by a moniker other than their legal name on certain university documents such as course rosters, student ID cards, and student emails. The students simply have to fill out a form. Faculty are not being told that they can't use courtesy titles in emailing with students or others, the school told Huffington Post, and the courtesy title policy has no impact on verbal speech. Of course, that's not to say they won't eventually try something like that. That was not the impression some professors received, according to the Journal. They thought the policy might cover all their communications, written and verbal, formal and casual, with their students. Faculty speech has not been restricted, Graduate Center President Chase F. Robinson told Huffington Post in a statement. And honestly, it's hard to figure out what exactly they're trying to go for. Whether it's Mr. or Mrs., or if they're going for some sort of doctorate role.
And I'm Dr. Not.
Yes, exactly. Of course, I digress, ladies and gentlemen, in the fact that I am not a doctor, and I'll leave that sort of thing to an actual doctor to figure out exactly what they're trying to do here. And on Sunday, U.S. District Judge Kelly V.S. Grenade, who struck down the same-sex marriage ban in Alabama, put the ruling on a 14-day hold for Alabama's Attorney General to make their case to an appeals court. According to NBC News, if the appeals court doesn't extend or lift the stay by the end of the 14 days, the ruling will take effect on February 9th. According to Time Inc., Alabama is the most conservative state in the Union. In 2006, 81% of Alabamians voted for a constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage, an amendment struck down by Grenade on Friday, January 23rd, for being unconstitutional. Oh, crying out loud. 81% of Alabamians cry out that they don't want to have gay marriage happen in their state, and Grenade throws them a grenade, has it blow up, and is now saying, oh, cry me a river. Isn't that right, Jay?
Oh, yeah. Cry me indeed. Good grief.
Yes. And do you have anything in global socialism, Jay?
Yes, we do, Corey. Yes, we do. And it comes out of the state of Texas tonight. A rally at the Texas Capitol on Thursday by Muslims seeking religious tolerance was repeatedly disrupted by a small group of protesters who said the state belonged to followers of Jesus Christ and that Muslims should go back to the Middle East. During opening remarks at the Texas Muslim Capital Day event, a Christian activist from Michigan grabbed the microphone. Apologize about the noise there, ladies and gentlemen. Grabbed the microphone from the speaker and said, quote, "I proclaim the name of the Lord Jesus Christ over the capital of Texas. I stand against Islam." A group of people who described themselves as Christian activists also heckled the group of about 600 who showed up for the rally. The protesters shouted as the Muslim group sang the national anthem and then tried to interrupt speakers calling for religious tolerance. Some of the protesters shouted, quote, "Go home. You ain't going to be happy here." There are about 500,000 Muslims in Texas, according to some estimates, with many being in the state for several generations. The Texas Department of Public Safety said no arrests were made at the event. Some U.S. Islamic groups have been reportedly stepped up harassment since deadly attacks by the Islamic gunmen at the offices of the French satirical weekly magazine Charlie Hebdo and the kosher supermarket in Paris earlier this month. And a Texas lawmaker newly elected is now under fire for a Facebook post asking Muslim visitors attending an event at the state capitol in Austin to pledge allegiance to the United States. The event, Texas Muslim Capital Day, which we just covered in the previous story, of course, was organized by the Texas chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Molly White, a House Republican, wrote, "Today is Texas Muslim Capital Day in Austin. The House is in recess until Monday. Most members, including myself, are back in district. I did leave an Israeli flag on the reception desk in my office with instructions to staff to ask representatives from the Muslim community to renounce Islamic terrorist groups and publicly announce allegiance to America and our laws. We will see how long they stay in my office." The post followed a similar Facebook message that was posted along with a report from the right-wing supposed right-wing news website about a Dallas community creating a voluntary Sharia court to dispense Islamic justice. Remember, in the Quran, it's okay to lie for the purpose of advancing Islam, she wrote. Texans must never allow fringe groups of people to come here so they can advance their own culture instead of becoming an American and assimilating into an American way of life. That, I can assure, is not the intent of most Muslims who move to America. The post immediately drew some criticism from Facebook users. "You can't seriously be this clueless," one wrote. "Not very Christian of you. We should organize a group to come visit you and shower you with love in return for your hate. That would what would Jesus do? But what would you know about that?" Said one Facebook user, who I'm not going to let know of his identification. Just like the extremist groups hiding under the Muslim label, looks like we've got an extremist hiding here under the label of Christianity, another wrote. "Next, can you ask all the people visiting the Capitol to denounce the KKK?" Laura Wright asked. "When you do, please ask your staff to make a YouTube video. I'd watch it. This is a gross misuse of political office," said another. In response, CARE sent a letter to Texas House Speaker Joe Straus asking if White had violated any House rules and discriminated against certain religious minorities trying to meet with her or her staff. They asked, the letter asked, quote, "Are House members prohibited from making constituents taking oaths before meeting with their elected representatives or House staff?" White's comments come, of course, after the deadly terror attacks in France, as we mentioned earlier. And, ladies and gentlemen, moving on tonight to a Supreme Court case that could have effect on unions. For years, Rebecca Fredericks, a veteran teacher in Buena Park, California, a suburb of Los Angeles, had monthly union dues docked from her paycheck. Even though she didn't like the union's positions on school choice and other education reforms, which he theoretically got in return, collective bargaining for pay raises, benefits, and job security that comes with representation, by one of the most powerful unions in her profession. Wasn't a selling point. Her 3 years as a full-fledged board member trying to work within the system was more frustrating than empowering. That's why in a real-world civics lesson this week, she and 9 other teachers petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court to hear their arguments against the law and overturn it. More is at stake than just $600 to $1,000. Fredericks and her colleagues paid in union dues each year. If the court agrees with them and overturns the law, the ruling would deal a crippling blow not only to 295,000 members of the California Teachers Association, but also to the national organized labor movement in itself in 26 states that have similar laws for public employees' unions. Fredericks believes teachers should have the freedom to decide for themselves if they join the union, especially if its positions cut against what she thinks most teachers want. She said, quote, "When unions use our dues money to block sensible reform and protect teachers who clearly do not belong in the classroom, it's time to say enough is enough," Fredericks said in a statement. At issue is California's agency shop law, which forces members of a unionized profession to pay dues even if they don't support or have membership in the union. Teachers in California can opt out of paying CTA dues spent on political efforts like lobbying by asking for a refund, but they can't opt out of dues used for collective bargaining. Fredericks and her colleagues, however, argue that the opt-out process is so complex they end up contributing hundreds of dollars to political activities which they have disagreed. The gist of the petition is claiming that compulsory union dues violates the First Amendment right for employees to decide for themselves what causes to support, said Terry Pell, president of the Center for Individual Rights. The conservative-leaning organization is backing Fredericks and her co-plaintiffs, along with Christian Educators Association International, in the court challenge. He continued, quote, "We're not challenging the union's authority to be a collective bargaining agent for teachers, and the CTA could still do that even if the Supreme Court ruled against it," Pell said. The problem, he continued, is it takes very political positions on education issues, school choice, for example, or teacher tenure, that some of its members don't like, and spends dues backing partisan election campaigns. The First Amendment doesn't allow the state to compel speech. It can't force individuals to speak out, and it can't prevent individuals from speaking when they do want to speak, Pell said. The only question is whether the union fairly and accurately represents the interest of its members. The High Court has heard a case like this before. Last year, the justices ruled on Harris versus Quinn, which challenged Illinois' version of California's agency shop law. The court upheld the Illinois law, but just barely. It declared unions couldn't collect dues from employees who didn't want to join, and signaled it was open to another more focused challenge to the law. So we'll keep you up to date on the latest on this current lawsuit in the Supreme Court against the California Teachers Association here in California. And of course, Corey will have more lawsuits later in lawsuits across America. Now to some of the day's other political news. Republican Governor Greg Abbott began dismantling a flagship initiative of his predecessor Thursday, saying he will abolish Rick Perry's pet program that gave $200 million in taxpayer money to Texas startups and was beset by bankruptcies and questionable claims of success. The decision is not surprising. Abbott signaled through his campaign that the Texas Emerging Technology Fund troubled him ideologically, but problems with the decade-old program ran deeper than the new Republican distaste for governments picking winners and losers in the private sector. Texas lost tens of millions of dollars investing in failing high-risk startups, and the fund's inner workings largely were kept from public view. An Associated Press investigation last year revealed undisclosed troubles with state-funded companies that had stagnated, didn't file tax reports, and made questionable job creation claims. Perry hitched his 2012 presidential campaign in a booming Texas economy and bragged about how the tech fund and his other economic policies kept the states prosperous while the rest of the U.S. lurched from recession. Now, as Perry gears up for a possible presidential run in 2016, his conservative successor has scrapped the tech fund within his first 10 days in office. Abbott wants the money set aside for startups to be spent instead on recruiting top faculty talent to Texas universities. He said, quote, "Texas will continue to make meaningful and effective investments in job creation." Now we must also harness our resources to evaluate Texas's higher education institutions as an integral part in our economic advancement. Lawmakers still must okay abolishing the tech fund, but Abbott is unlikely to face strong resistance. Responding to Abbott's decision, Perry spokesman Travis Conside said the fund has played an important role of the diversification of Texas's economy and has succeeded in keeping innovative technologies in Texas. Perry likely won't see his legacy on economic development undone entirely. A similar but separate program, the Texas Enterprise Fund, appears headed for survival, but not without reforms. That was Perry's signature Dale closing fund used to lure companies to Texas, such as when Toyota received $40 million last year to relocate its California headquarters to suburban Dallas. Part of Abbott's announcement calls for taking half the unused money in the tech fund, which aides say is more than $100 million, and spending it on enterprise fund applications instead. All right, folks, moving on to some D.C. news. The Republican-controlled Senate today approved the bipartisan bill to construct the Keystone XL oil pipeline, defying a presidential veto threat and setting up the first of many battles with the White House over energy and the environment. The 62-36 vote advanced the top priority of the newly empowered GOP and marked the first time the Senate passed a bill authorizing the pipeline. Despite numerous attempts to force President Obama's hand on the issue, 9 Democrats joined the 53 Republicans to back the measure. The bill is an important accomplishment for this country, said Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and BS artist of the Senate. We are hoping the President, upon reflection, will agree to sign to a bill that the State Department said could create up to 42,000 jobs, and the State Department said creates little to no impact on the economy. Still, the vote was short of the threshold needed to override a veto, and the legislation still must be reconciled within the version of that the House passed earlier. We hope President Obama will now drop his threat to veto this common-sense bill that would strengthen our energy security and create thousands of new, good-paying American jobs, said House Speaker and BS artist John Boehner. Most Democrats framed the bill as a gift to a foreign oil company that would give little benefit for the American people because much of the oil would be exported. They tried and failed to get amendments on the bill to construct the pipeline with the U.S. steel, ban imports of the oil and the products refined from it, and protect water resources. The Senate agreed to add an energy efficiency measure, went on to record saying that what they say was climate change was not a hoax, and that oil sands should be subject to a tax and helps pay for oil spill cleanups. Oil sands are currently exempt. Outgoing Senator Barbara Boxer of California said, quote, "This bill is a disgrace." The top Democrat on the Senate Environment Committee continued saying, "We tried on our side to make this a better bill, and they turned us away." TransCanada Corp, the pipeline's developer, disputed the export argument Thursday, saying it didn't make sense. Just like I say, I say, and I'm paraphrasing Judge Judy, this bill's baloney, Corey. It doesn't make any sense.
And Barbara Boxer can go eat.
Yes, indeed, she can. All right, one more piece of D.C. news before I send it over to Corey Evan for tonight's lawsuits across America. The U.S. military said Wednesday it has chosen a Boeing 747-8 aircraft for a new fleet of Air Force One presidential planes, opting against an airliner made by Airbus. The current aircraft used by President Obama, with its famous blue and white color scheme, is also a 747, but a much older model that dates back more than 2 decades. The Boeing 747-8 is the only aircraft manufactured in the United States when fully missionized meets the necessary capabilities established to execute the presidential support mission. U.S. Air Force Secretary Deborah James said in a statement, although the current 747-200s flown by the president have performed exceptionally well over the years, James said it's time to upgrade. The Pentagon had considered the Boeing airliner as well as the A380 made by European aerospace giant Airbus, though industry analysts have assumed Boeing would get the nod. Pentagon officials said they had selected the 747-8 without a formal competition and would proceed with discussions with Boeing to work out the details of a contract. The president's plane has long been a symbol of American power in the setting for historic moments, including the somber 1963 ceremony when Lyndon Johnson took the oath of office on board hours after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The plane is often portrayed in Hollywood films and inspired a 1997 thriller titled Air Force One, which starred Harrison Ford, in which the U.S. president played by the aforementioned Ford must fight off hijackers. Outfitted with secure communications equipment and other gear, Air Force One is designed to serve as a mobile command center and served that role briefly after the attacks on September 11, 2001. It also features a suite for the commander-in-chief. Includes a large office, a conference room, as well as a medical area that can function as an operating room. The plane's galley can feed up to 100 people, and there are additional quarters for senior aides, including Secret Service agents and other staff. Air Force One is technically the radio call sign adopted by any aircraft when the president's on board, but has become identified with certain planes reserved for the president's air travel. The name was created in the 1950s when President Dwight Eisenhower's plane had the same call sign as a commercial airliner.
And now it's time for lawsuits across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evans.
Yeah. Sit, people. We gotta get to this right away. Pay attention, people. Officials of the exclusive Indian Mountain School in the Lakeville section of Salisbury in Connecticut stood by as students were sexually assaulted and blackmailed into keeping silent, a federal item claims. Mark Deavy, Indian Mountain's head of school, said administrators recently notified the school community that they were conducting an investigation to identify any alumni victimized while students at Indian Mountain School. The school was founded in 1922 and is a private boarding and day school in Litchfield County for children in kindergarten through grade 9. This is the second lawsuit filed in 3 months alleging the school refused to stop teachers and the school's headmaster from predatory sexual assaults and pedophilia inflicted on minor boys, including fellatio, sodomy, voyeurism, fondling, and forced... the M word. Buck, who is... a former student, now in his mid-40s, attended the school when he was 14 and 15. The lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court in Bridgeport because the student lives out of state, alleges that one of Indian Mountain's English teachers sexually abused, assaulted, and exploited dozens of boys at the school for more than a decade, and that he took photos of the boys to blackmail them into silence. Yuck. And a settlement has been reached in the federal lawsuit filed against the Kent Intermediate School District by a former employee who alleged she was discharged in violation of the Family Medical and Leave Act, according to court documents filed today. The settlement, details of which were not included in the document, comes less than 2 months after both sides agreed on a mediator, Bruce Neckers, with Rhodes McKee, PC. As you know, the law is a federal law that gives eligible employees the right to take off time for health issues and certain caregiver responsibilities, which Obama wants to expand on. But at any rate, on January 31st of last year, Erin Johnson says she was placed on FMLA because she required hip surgery. After returning to full-time status April 25th, she alleges her responsibilities were substantially reduced, and on May 12th, she was informed her position was being eliminated and was discharged on June 30th, according to the lawsuit. KISD lawyers denied that she was discharged, saying in their response that her contract expired on June 30th with the district, and she was paid all compensation to which she was entitled. For crying out loud. There they go again. The defendants always claiming, we already paid everything you want. What more do you want from us? But have you, KISD? We will find out somewhere down the road, and we will bring that to you when it becomes available. In the meantime, I declare today's lawsuits across America case dismissed.
Thank you very much, Corey. All right, folks, we have some breaking news coming in, and of course, this is a late report coming in on our end, but according to ABC News, 3 American contractors have been assassinated in a shooting incident at the international airport in Kabul, Afghanistan today. And it may have involved an Afghan security officer at the airport. This according to U.S. military officials. They say, quote, "We can confirm that there was a shooting incident at the northern Kabul International Airport complex on January the 29th at approximately 6:40 local time in Kabul, Afghanistan, according to the U.S. military. 3 coalition contractors were killed, as was an Afghan local national. The 3 Defense Department contractors were Americans, the U.S. officials said, knowing that there was a shooter who was wearing the uniform of an Afghan national policeman, but it was unclear if he was actually a member of the Afghan security forces or not. The shootings were on the civilian side of the airport, the official said. The incident is currently under investigation, the official said, and it is also unclear if the Afghan listed as a fatality is someone other than the shooter who was shot dead by the security team at the airport. Stay with the Evan Miller Report for more on this story. Of course, we'll give you the very latest on our Facebook page, facebook.com/the Evan Miller Report. And if there is an update, we will, of course, send it over to Ken McClinton during the Exceptional Conservative Show. All right, I'm going to go and send it back over to Corey, and he has an abbreviated entertainment report tonight. Corey, take it away.
Thank you, Jay. And I'll just focus on this story from Bruce Jenner, a.k.a. Exactly. Bruce Jenner is finally ready to share his side of the story. This according to the New York Daily News. The 65-year-old reality TV dad is reportedly starring in a documentary-style series for E! That will follow the former Olympian's personal life. Jenner has recently made headlines because of his changing appearance, including his manicured nails and long hair. During a recent interview with Entertainment Tonight, Kim Kardashian hinted that her stepdad would eventually reveal the reasons behind the changes. Ah, man. You can see why I brought up Dude Looks Like a Lady from Aerosmith. Forgive me, Aerosmith, if I broke any copyright laws there, but really, Bruce Jenner is a dude looks like a lady, you know? But at any rate, at the box office this weekend, you can check out Project Almanac with Sophia Black-D'Elia and Johnny Weston, or you can visit The Loft with James Marsden and Carl Urban, or you can live it up in Black and White with Kevin Costner and Jennifer Eel. At the box office right now, American Sniper is still holding on to number 1 at $64.6 million. The Boy Next Door has $14.9 million at second place, and Paddington Bear has $12.3 million. That's your entertainment report for today. Hope to entertain you again tomorrow. Till then, I'm Corey Evan, sending it back to Jason Miller to wrap up tonight's show. It's been an interesting show.
Yes, very interesting show indeed. Thank you very much, Corey Evan. And ladies and gentlemen, just to reiterate our breaking news tonight, that 3 American contractors have been killed in a shooting incident at the international airport in Kabul. And there was the shooting at 6:40 local time in Kabul, Afghanistan. Stay with us for more on this story. And of course, if we have any updates during the Exceptional Conservative Show, we will get you that information. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the Evan Miller Report for this Thursday, January the 29th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller.
And I'm Corey Evan. Follow us on Facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. Tweet us at EM Radio Report. You'll be glad you did. For all of us here at SHR Media, we thank you very much for listening, and we hope you'll tune in again tomorrow. Good night, everyone.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.